Do you have what I call the silent killer? Hi, I'm Dr. O. What is the silent killer? That is high blood pressure. Why do I call it the silent killer? Because this is a medical problem that can go undetected for a while. And for some unfortunate patients, by the time we find out that they have high blood pressure, it's too late. They've had a stroke, they've had a heart attack, they've damaged their kidneys, and sometimes their limbs. So why is this silent? Well, a lot of times we don't hear or feel what blood pressure is doing. It can be very, very silent. In fact, for a lot of patients, there's no signs or symptoms. Every now and then you will get the patient that says, yeah, I can feel my head throbbing. I have a headache when my blood pressure is elevated. But for majority of patients, we don't feel anything. And because we don't feel anything, we can just keep on going, living our stressful lives, never seeing the doctor because we're afraid of what the doctor might find, and just not know that there's anything wrong. So our blood pressure is one of the ways that we as medical professionals can usually pick up that something is starting to go wrong in the body. Because when the body is not feeling good, when it's sick, when there's infection, when there's not enough blood flow, it will elevate the blood pressure to alert us and let us know that there is something wrong. So let's take an example of a patient that walks into the doctor's office for the first time. And the doctor immediately have them sit down, checks their blood pressure, and it's elevated. Do I immediately diagnose that person with high blood pressure? Well, no. And here's why. For most patients, the first time they come to the doctor's office, it's a little nerve-wracking, right? There's all the paperwork, there's dealing with the front desk, there's dealing with insurance, there's traffic on the way here. Am I supposed to have my coffee, not have my coffee, drink, not drink, eat, not eat, so there's all that going on, right? And who knows, we'll cut them off before they got here also on the road, right? So there's all that stressor going on as they're walking into the doctor's office for the first time. So we don't like to use that first time blood pressure to diagnose anybody, okay? We write it down, we notate it, whether it's high, low, normal, right? But we don't make any medical decision based off of that one. Of course, if it's crazy high, right? Stroke level high, we're gonna address it. But, just slight elevation, for example, we would let that slide, right? And then we'll say, okay, let's get familiar with our practice. We'll see you next visit. We'll keep an eye on this thing and see what's really going on. Now, if I see that patient second time, third time, and their blood pressure continues to be elevated, well, that requires we have a discussion, right? There is something going on here. There's a signal that your body is giving me. There's a few patients that will have what we call white coat syndrome, which means that regardless of when they come to the doctor's office, they're always going to be nervous. And because of that nerve, their blood pressure is going to be elevated. So we rule those cases out by doing this simple thing. We have you buy what's called the blood pressure monitor for your home, right? It's an ambulatory blood pressure monitor. You can get it from most grocery store. They make different kinds. Some measures on the wrist, some measure it in the arm. I prefer the ones that measure it in the arm. They tend to be more accurate than the ones that measure in the wrist. But get something, right? So we get one that measures you. And we want to measure you at home consistently at the same time roughly, preferably first thing in the morning, before you get irritated by anybody or listen to the news that might tick you off, or as soon as you wake up, you check it, you notate it on a notepad, right? And you do that for several days, preferably roughly 2 weeks. And if that morning blood pressure is elevated, that is suggestive of some type of pathology, because normally in the middle of the night, your body is supposed to recalibrate, right? Things are supposed to go back to homeostasis, to their normal balance. Water is supposed to shift to where water is supposed to go. Blood goes where it needs to go. Toxins move to where they need to go. So in the morning, first thing in the morning, you should have the best blood pressure you're going to have for the day. Well, if that blood pressure is elevated, well, that's telling me something, even in the middle of the night, didn't get calibrated. Something is still off, right? So now we got to go digging and looking and finding what is off with you, right? We need to fix that. So when a patient brings their ambulatory blood pressure report and that is still elevated, confirmed with my blood pressure in the office that's also elevated, well, that's when we really want to start addressing things, okay? So think of the blood pressure as your signal that your heart is pumping against a very restricted pumping system, right? And why is that pumping system restricted, right? Is it because there's starting to be plaques and things in that blood vessel that's narrowing the opening of the blood vessel? Or are there things outside of the blood vessel themselves that's constricting it from the outside, right? Or is it what's in the blood vessel, which means what you're eating and putting into your bloodstream that's causing the elevation? So we then have to do that investigation to find out. And we start to look at what damage has that done to your end organs, like your kidneys, like your brain, like your heart itself, right? So we start to look at those things and make sure that, is this just an elevation because of some acute stress? Do you have a project that you're working on at work that's due in a couple of days that you're up all night addressing? Or is this more of a chronic stress? Are you dealing with some chronic trauma? Are you dealing with, some chronic pain, right? So a lot of patients can have elevated blood pressure because they have chronic pain, right? So I'll have a patient with chronic back pain from like a motor vehicle accident coming to the office. Of course their blood pressure is going to be elevated. Their body is trying to signal them to let them know, hey, address this discomfort I'm having in the back, right? It's going to raise their blood pressure because of that. And so, yes, if a patient is in pain, I expect to see an elevation in the blood pressure. But once that pain is treated and controlled, I also expect that blood pressure to also go down, right? So if I'm treating the pain and the blood pressure still stays elevated, that's telling me I need to look a little bit farther, right? So I'm going to then dig even more. So we are now finding that, okay, a lot of patients, after monitoring their blood pressure at home, they bring their numbers, we're looking at it, and we found, okay, yes, your blood pressure is elevated. What is the first thing we do? So most doctors are going to immediately start to put you on a blood pressure medication. And is that the right answer? It depends, right? It depends on how high is that blood pressure. Because if it's so high that I'm worried that you're going to get a heart attack or stroke from it, well, yes, it might be time to quickly treat it so it doesn't cause that problem. But if it is a slight elevation, there are a couple of things that I like to look at and say, look, are we dealing with a metabolic issue here where this patient is carrying excess weight? And can I help them lose that excess weight so that that can remove the underlying cause of that elevated blood pressure? Because we do see elevated blood pressure in patients that carry excess abdominal fat. So the minute you come into my practice and I'm seeing that you're carrying extra 20, 30, 40 pounds of fat around your midsection, well, I'm expecting to treat that first because I know that if I don't address that fat, well, it's only going to lead to high blood pressure, which is then going to lead to heart disease, which is then going to lead to strokes and so on, right? So we address the underlying cause, which is this excess weight that you're carrying, and we know that as we remove 10, 20 pounds of fat from your body, the toxins go away with them, right? And the blood pressure starts to improve with that. So we're going to look at how do we help you lose weight. We're going to look at what are you putting in your body that's causing your blood pressure to be elevated. Are you overly salting your food? And this is one a lot of patients will sometimes tell me, but doctor, I'm not adding anything to my food. I don't add any salt. Well, it's not the one you added. It's one that's been added from the people that processed your food. So if you're eating processed food, somebody else has added the salt for you. So even if though you're not adding the salt, it's still there. Okay, so the way to eliminate that is not to buy processed food. Shop around the periphery of the grocery store where all the fresh foods and meats and cheese and things are. So you can buy those fresh items and then you prepare it, right? So when you do that, then you know you're not adding added salt, right? So we want to remove that excess salt from the food to also help with that blood pressure. So all refined foods, all junk food, we know are high in sodium. In fact, to give you an example, I saw a patient recently, it's just been over the holidays, and he came in with this humongous swelling in his legs, and his blood pressure was super high. And, you know, I asked him, you know, what's changed? And he's like, no, nothing, I still eat the same, and, you know, nothing's new. Except, you know, I went over the holiday with the family that came to visit, and we went to eat Chinese. And, you know, it was shortly after that I started seeing this swelling in my legs. And I go, yep, that's it right there. You know, you went and ate Chinese food, which was obvious, processed, had a lot of hidden sodium in it. And the swelling started because of that, because the body had to retain a lot of water to process all that excess salt. And of course that elevated the blood pressure along with caused the swelling in his legs. So as soon as we recognized that, we're like, well, no more Chinese for you. And we were able to successfully flush that out of the system and reset everything. Okay, so there are some dietary causes, is what I'm saying, that can cause your blood pressure to be elevated. And if you're the one that indulges in, you know, junk food, eating out at restaurants and things like that all the time, yes, you're going to have elevated blood pressure because of what's in your food. So the other thing that we see that can cause this silent killer is stress, right? So I tell patients, I can help with a lot of things, but managing your stress is something that it's definitely in your hands, right? You have to know when too much is too much, right? And when you need to say no, when you need to, you know, cut people off so you can get some rest, or just not pile on more projects, right? I know there's some stressors that's not avoidable, right? You're a caregiver to someone in your home, and you know the stress of caring for them can be stressful to you. But I'm talking about stress that we put on ourselves, right? Trying to, like, you know, be like somebody else and take on extra tasks because, you know, they're not going to be better than me type of thing. Right, so those type of stressors that we have control over, and just saying, no, I'm not going to do that. My plate is full. I can't take on any more project. No, I cannot volunteer for that this week. You know, so we can take some time for ourselves to breathe, to meditate, to pray, to walk, to exercise, to basically help our bodies heal, right? So those are things that we have to do, because when we're stressed, guess what is elevated? It is this very important hormone that comes out of our adrenal glands. It's called the stress hormone, or cortisol. And when cortisol is elevated, well, what's going to happen? That's one of our fight or flight hormones. What does that do? Well, fight or flight means that your blood pressure has to rise, right? To get you ready either to fight or to run, right? So the blood is going to have to gush and come up, right? So stress or release of cortisol, right, can elevate blood pressure. And that's why meditating and praying and taking time to rest, taking time to walk, taking time to laugh can be very helpful for your body to heal and not have this high blood pressure or silent killer. So those are just a few things that you need to be mindful of as the causes of this problem. But why do we really worry about blood pressure so much, right? I've mentioned some of them, and they're the end organ damage that we see with elevated blood pressure. Is that when this pressure stays high for years and years and goes untreated, we start to see damage, right, to our heart. For example, the heart muscle, it now has to get so enlarged or so big because it's pumping against such a high pressure. So it gets really, really muscular to try to address that. Well, this enlargement also causes more demand on your body, because now an enlarged heart requires even more oxygen and more blood flow to it, right? So now you're needing more nutrients to your heart, okay? So your heart itself can fail because of too much elevation in your blood pressure. And your brain, right, is seeing this high pressure all the time. Well, that starts to cause ischemia, areas of your brain that are damaged permanently. Right? Now you're not thinking straight. Now you're developing early Alzheimer's and dementia. You're having memory problems, vision problems, right? You can't sleep well. All these things is happening because this blood pressure has stayed on high for so long in a silent manner, and you didn't even know all this was happening, right? So those are some of the things that we're seeing. And another end organ that we worry about, of course, is the kidneys. Right? A lot of patients end up on dialysis. Why? Because this high blood pressure damages the kidney over time, right? It's a filtering system, but it's very sensitive to pressure, right? So you're constantly elevated blood pressure for years and years damages your kidney, and then at one point it just poops out. And the only solution is now you have to spend 3-4 days a week in the dialysis center. That could have been prevented if we just ate better, avoided certain things, and actually checked it, right? So I encourage all of you to get a monitor. Check your ambulatory blood pressure for 2 weeks straight. First thing in the morning when you wake up, write it down. What are we looking for? Yes, we want the top number to be less than 140. We want the bottom number to be less than 90. All right, so if they are lower than that, we're okay. We also don't like blood pressure too low. If that top number is starting to get below 100 and the bottom number is starting to get below 70, well, that's something that we also worry about, because too low of a blood pressure can also be an indication of some problems to come, right? So we want to monitor it, we want to track it, we want to report it to your doctor so that we can make the right recommendations for you to stay optimal, functional, and live the best life for a long time. All right, if you have any questions about this topic, please put it in the comment below. And don't forget to subscribe, join the free VIP group so we can share more juicy topics. I'll see you on the next one.